All right. Hi, everybody. I've just had us go live on Facebook and have also just opened up the Zoom to all registrants. So please get yourself cozy. We're going to be planning to get going here in just another minute or so. And for those of you just signing on, we're going to just hold off until I see the Zoom attendee list start to stabilize. So I thank you for your patience. All right, so it's continuing to track upwards. So I'm going to give it just a couple more seconds here, and then we'll plan to have me talk, and then I'll turn it over to the people that you're actually here to see. All right, looks like it's starting to stabilize, so I'm just gonna go on right ahead. So good afternoon to most of you, and good morning to those couple of you I see that we have on here from Hawaii. Regardless of where you're at, I'm thankful that you've joined our webinar today. This year, we've had a whole bunch of webinars about a whole bunch of things, licensing, PPP loans, business training, you name it. And at the start of each one, I spend a few minutes talking about Alliance Core. Today's going to be a little different. Today, actually, our guest speakers will be spending most of the day talking about Alliance Core for me. So thank you, Vero and Johira. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Michael, and I serve as the ELV Membership Development Manager. ELV, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we've staked our claim as the nonprofit shared services approach to childcare management systems, which is a very wordy way to say that we run CORE. We're joined today by two researchers from the Quality Consulting and Research Group. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to them share their efforts in quantifying CORE's benefits internally. So I hope you all enjoy it externally. And so we're joined by Veronica Fernandez and Johira Buza. Before handing it over, I do have to talk about CORE just a hair. It's part of my job. So Vero and Johira are going to be discussing CORE from the provider level perspective, what it looks like for an individual site, but there are many benefits for hubs as well. One such benefit is the ability to have real-time data. So what I'm showing on the screen right now is a number of open sites in the Colorado ELV network from January through the end of last week. If this kind of information is of interest to you, please feel free to reach out to me from the post-webinar messaging. We've got all kinds of data. We've been updating and we've also been updating our system with some things that will not show up in Vero and Johira's scope of work because they were implemented this year. Specifically, one of those is our touchless sign-in and sign-out capabilities. And then another one, which is really awesome, is our temperature and health check capability. So I see we have several of our current providers on here. So if you are on here and you're not using either of these currently, but you're interested in them, please feel free to reach out to ELV client support and we'd be happy to help you with all of this. Okay, last thing before I turn it over, we have all kinds of useful information on our social media, so please find us on our Facebook if you haven't already. We'll be sending along a post-webinar email with a recording of today's talk, a copy of our speakers' slides, and links to our social media and elsewhere. So don't worry if you can't find it right now, you'll get a link with it all after. And for those of you on Facebook, if you can register, my teammate Milena will be putting in a link in the comments. But I'm going to stop there and hand it over so that Vero and Johira can dive into the provider's perspective. So please, Vero and Johira, take it away.
Are you all able to see my screen now?
Yep.
Great. So my name is Johira, and I'm really excited to be sharing the results of some of the work that we've done to see how early childhood programs are using and are benefiting from Alliance Core. We've been doing this work for about a year now, so it's very exciting to be able to share the findings with you all. So just to give you a little bit of background, the goal of Alliance Core and why it was created was to reduce the administrative and regulatory burden for programs. So that way, if they didn't have to focus on so much administrative work, they can have time to focus on other resources and other ways to improve the quality of their program. So we were working really closely with ELV's Early Head Start Childcare Partnership programs, and we wanted to understand how is it that they were using Alliance Core. So we asked the administrators of about 36 sites about their use over time, about how knowledgeable they felt about Alliance Core, and about what benefits they saw in using Alliance Core. So about 92% of the administrators reported that their use of Alliance Core had increased over time since their first year. So as they started working with the program, they also started receiving support from ELV. And I think that in combination with all that, we can really see that many of the programs, most of them, increase their use over time. And there were some programs, so just to give you a little bit of background, this 2.8% actually just represents one program. So some of the programs, it was their first time using it. Some of the programs, their use had stayed the same. And only one of the programs, it had decreased over time. And then we asked them how knowledgeable they felt about Alliance Core. And 82% reported feeling extremely or very knowledgeable of using Alliance Core. And one really important thing to note is that none of them said that they didn't feel not at all knowledgeable of using Alliance Core. So as they started using the system and receiving support from ELV, they really started gaining a lot of knowledge throughout this. And then we wanted to know a little bit more about what specific benefits the site administrators were finding in Alliance Core. So they identified a range from 3 to 21 benefits. And on average, site administrators identified about 11 benefits. So there's this long list of benefits, these 21 benefits, and they were able to check off as many as apply. So here in this slide, what we did is that we ranked ordered the first 7 benefits from all the sites. So we can see here that about 86% said that that one of the benefits of using Alliance Core was having a centralized system for entering and tracking data saves them time. Then we see about 80%. They said Alliance Core helps them in maintaining and updating the contact information for families and that they're confident that they can be reached when needed. When we think about these benefits from a program perspective, first of all, the fact that it saves them time, we're really excited about that because that way site administrators can focus on other quality improvement efforts within their program, which is exactly why Alliance Core was created. And then especially now with everything that's going on with the pandemic, we think about being able to communicate with families as this really, really top priority. And being confident that they could reach them is a really important benefit that they're identifying of Alliance Core. About 78% of them are saying it's easier and quicker to complete the CCAP billing. And so therefore it's easier for them to be reimbursed. 75% of them are saying that it's easy to monitor their program's quality improvement by using the continuous improvement plan, which is something that's used by Early Head Start. 75% of them are saying that Alliance Core makes it easy to track the health and safety information in their program. And again, when we think about the current situation that's going on with COVID-19, how important is to keep the health and safety information of the children. And I was actually really excited to see that Michael presented that they added a new feature about taking the temperature and really increasing the health and safety that's going on in this program so these children could be safe. And about 75% of them said Alliance Core helps them when knowing when their children are absent so they can conduct the welfare check-ins. And just keep in mind that this 75% are just identifying that Alliance Core helps them conduct the welfare checks, but 100% of the programs are conducting the welfare checks. And then 75% of them are saying that Alliance Core helps them in their licensing inspections running more smoothly. So these are the top 7 benefits when we look at all the sites together. But we were really interested in seeing what were the top benefits when we looked at just centers and just family childcare. So in this next slide, I have the top 7 benefits that centers are reporting. And we see that 100% of the centers are reporting that Alliance Core helps them know when children are absent so they can conduct these welfare check-ins. So really using Alliance Core to support them in identifying when the children are absent and being able to follow up with them. And then about 90% of them are saying that having a centralized system for entering and tracking data saves them time. We see about 81% of them are saying that it helps them communicate with specific families and staff members, and it makes that communication easier and faster. So when we look at the top 7 benefits and we look at them together, both centers and family childcare homes, this is not a benefit that shows up, but yet centers are identifying that communicating with specific families and staff members is a benefit of Alliance Core. We see this benefit that we talked about earlier in the other slide about updating the contact information, the CCAP billing, the health and safety, the quality improvement. And then another benefit that doesn't show up when we look at them all together is family engagement and communication. So centers, 66% of the centers are identifying that Alliance Core is supporting them and engaging their families, and that their communication has increased because of their use of Alliance Core. So now we look a little bit deeper into what were the benefits that the top 7 benefits for family childcare. And we see that 93% of them are saying Alliance Core helps them with their licensing inspections running more smoothly. So that is their first, that's the benefit that they identify the most, which is a little different in terms of the rank order that what we see for centers and what we see when we look at them combined. Then 86.7% are saying that it's easier to monitor the quality improvement by using the continuous improvement plan. And we see that 80% are saying that having a centralized system saves them time in entering and tracking data. We again see the CCAP billing, the updating the contact information, the health and safety. Then we see family engagement and communications with family has also increased. And about 53% of the family childcare homes are saying that the team is able to dedicate more time to interactions with children. All right. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about specific features and identifying how much they're using the specific feature and how useful they are. And Vero, did you want to add anything about the specific benefits before we move on to that?
No, I think you summed it all up. We see that in summary, both centers and family childcare are reporting benefits of utilizing Alliance Core. These benefits are slightly different, but there's also a lot of overlap, and it makes sense within the context of their priorities, particularly the size of the programs. Did you want me to do this part, Jahara? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, so when we're talking about the specific features, since you have the notes.
Okay, sure. So the next thing we did is we asked them about specific features of Alliance Core. We asked them about how frequently they were using these individual features, and we asked them how useful they thought these features were. So the first feature we asked about was about provider primary information, schedule, and room setup, which is a basic feature of Alliance Core. And what we found was that the frequency of use was relatively evenly split. So people are using this with different frequencies. Some folks are using this every single day. Some folks are updating this once a year. And there is a percentage of folks that are not using this feature at all, about 11% of folks. This actually only represents about 4 programs. And we asked them why they weren't using the program. So the more common response was that the folks who were not using the feature was because they did not feel comfortable, or they just didn't know enough about the feature, or didn't think it was useful because they're using something different to capture this information. Then of the people who said they were using it to some extent, so at least updating once a year, we asked them how useful they thought this feature was. And 91% of folks who are using Alliance Core reported that it was useful, very useful, or extremely useful. So that's good news. The folks that are using it find it to be very useful.
And so one thing that I think is important to know when we think about the frequency of use and we think about this feature, is that this is a feature that really helps you set up the classrooms that you have, the schedule. So when we're saying that the frequency of use is different across them, that may just be due to the fact that these programs don't change that information very often. So as we go through these features, we have to think a little bit about what is a frequency of use that's ideal, because it may be different for certain features.
We also asked about online enrollment. The frequency of use for online enrollment was also pretty relatively evenly split. There were 22% of respondents who weren't using it at all, and that equates to about 8 respondents. And the most common reason for not using it was, I don't feel comfortable, or I don't know enough about this feature. And of the folks who were using it, 89% reported it as useful, very useful, or extremely useful. We also asked about the child file management. About half of the folks are using it every single day. So this is something that seems to be utilized much more frequently in programs. And when we look at the small percent who were not using it, that actually just represents one center. And they said they don't currently use it, but they have aspirations, right? They want to use it in the future. And we have shared this with the coaches at the ELB team who can support the programs who do have aspirations that want to use certain features more frequently in being able to provide that individualized support for programs. So of the folks who reported using the feature, 97% reported it as useful, very useful, extremely useful. We also looked at the use of child attendance feature. Most use it daily. And the good news is that no admins chose never, right? So there are no admins that are not using this feature at all. So everybody that was using the feature, you can go next, yeah. So 100% of the folks who are using the feature reported it as useful, very useful, or extremely useful. We asked about childcare assistance program attendance. So this is typically referred to as CCAP. And about half of the folks use it daily. Some folks are not using it at all. Some of them are just not enrolled in the program, or some of them are still tracking this on paper and are not taking advantage of the seamless integration across the two systems. And of the folks who are using this program, 97% report it as very useful, or as useful, very useful, or extremely useful. We also asked about the child and adult food program, the tracking and reporting for that feature. And this was one where we had the highest percentage of programs saying that they're not using this feature at all. So the most common explanation for the folks that were not using it said that they had another system to track this information. But of the folks who were using it, 91% of them reported it as useful, very useful, or extremely useful. We also examined staff file management. So the frequency of use was relatively evenly split, except for quarterly, that was quite small. We did have a percent of folks who said they weren't using it at all. And of those folks who weren't using it at all, they said that they have a very small program and don't find it necessary to input all the information into the system. There were also a few folks that said they didn't know about the feature, don't feel comfortable using it. And again, that's been communicated to the folks who are on the ground supporting these administrators to perhaps use it if it's a lack of understanding or knowledge of the feature. Of the folks who were using this feature, 87% reported it as useful, very useful, or extremely useful. We asked about staff attendance. The staff attendance feature, the majority of folks are using it every single day. We did have a percentage that about 17% were never using it. That equates to about 6 programs. And generally the reason that they don't use it is because they have a different system for using timesheets or checking in. Also some of the smaller programs, some of the family Child Cares also said, I don't have staff, it's just myself, so I'm not tracking that. We have talked with the, go back. We have talked with the ELV team of the importance of being able to track ratios, and the importance of keeping track of child attendance and staff attendance, and making sure that those features are being used so that they're able to track ratios daily. Of the folks, go back.
Sorry.
So of the folks who are using the system, 97% report it as useful, very useful, or extremely useful. Okay. We also asked about the parent file management feature. The frequency of use here also varies. So some folks are using it every single day, while others are using it once a year. And there was a small percentage of folks, 2 programs, who are not using it at all. And the reason that they reported not using it, some of them said it's somebody else's responsibility, or they don't find it useful for their programs. Again, when we dug a little deeper, the ones who said that they didn't find it useful, it was typically much smaller programs that didn't have a lot of enrollment or a lot of slots. Of the folks that were using it, 97% reported it as being useful, very useful, or extremely useful. The billing module, this was actually the highest piece that was the feature who was used the least by programs. So here we had a large percentage of folks who weren't using this at all. The majority of providers or the majority of programs never use this feature. But of the ones who do use the feature, 82% report it as useful, very useful, or extremely useful. So if they're using it, they seem to be pretty satisfied and find it useful, but not a lot of folks are using this feature. So when we look at the association between the total scores of usefulness and benefits, we see that the more frequently administrators are using Alliance Score, the higher their usefulness rating. So of course, this is not causal, these are just correlations, but this would suggest that the more somebody uses Alliance Score, the more useful they find it. We also see a correlation between usefulness and benefits. So the more useful they find it, the more benefits they report as well. So let's take a pause there and see if there are any questions in the chat about these features. Michael, is there anything that we want to bring up or clarify? I haven't been able to keep track of the questions that were going on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So some of the questions that came in were largely in regards to a concept known as the iron triangle. And so around collections and enrollment. And so I do think you managed to talk about the billing module that answers the collections side of it. And oh, it looks like I know Louise, who we have on. Louise, would you mind just putting in your question that you'd like to ask, and I'll hang on a moment and then read it out. But yeah, so thus far, I feel like quite a few of the questions that have come in, you've already directly answered later on. So those of you that are raising your hand, if you wouldn't mind utilizing the chat feature, as Zoom webinar does not allow for any kind of audio from the audience. So it's all typing, I'm sorry.
So what Michael was saying is interesting in terms of, how ELV can use these data and these analysis to think about an implementation or approach and some strategic planning around utilization of this feature. So when we talked from the very beginning in terms of what is the goal of Alliance Core, the entire purpose of using Alliance Core is to reduce the administrative and regulatory burden on providers so that they can use their time for things that are going to directly benefit children. So of course, once they take a look at these data and they look at the utilization rates, they can make strategic decisions about how to support programs to use features that not only are going to increase the health and safety of programs, but are also going to streamline services for providers so that they could spend their time on things that directly benefit the staff, the families that they serve, and the children.
And I also think it'd be worth mentioning just the approach from ELV in general around how we do client support, because it's an absolute focal point of this work, as we've seen. So the little mantra that we like to give is, if it's going to take you more than 2 minutes to figure something out, to just call us instead. And, if you wouldn't mind going back one slide to just the correlation between, frequency and usefulness. I think that really is highlighting that right there, is that the providers that are willing to work with this kind of shared services approach, that are going to make those calls when something that they're not totally sure on, they will call and learn that tech with our team. I think you're seeing that level of success there. And so, the wedding of client support with tech is something that we are intimately interested in and continuing on. And then it's also, one of our big goals and big challenges just as a team moving forward. And some of this came from the data from our team here today, is just around product adoption. Is, we have people that are using a whole bunch of it, but how do we get to those providers that might not make as many of those, 2-minute calls? So, just internally, that's something that we're looking at all the time. And we are getting better at it, but something to continue looking at. So those of you that did have questions, I'm not seeing those pop in. So I figure what we'll do is let Vero and Johira continue onwards, and then we'll have a questions portion at the end.
Absolutely. So the next thing that we did was examine the association between Alliance Core and childcare interaction quality. We particularly looked at the usefulness ratings in Alliance Core. So these are folks who are using Alliance Core features, they're rating them as being useful, and we summed up their usefulness score, and we looked at the associations between that usefulness rating and the already collected teacher-child interaction quality observation scores that ELV had conducted. So these are programmatic observations that had already been conducted for the purposes of ELV. We are particularly looking at the toddler classroom assessment scoring system, which is a widely used measure of teacher-child interaction quality, and it has 2 domains. The first one is emotional and behavioral support. And this focuses on specific teacher behaviors that really help children develop warm and supportive relationships. It helps children experience enjoyment and excitement about learning, feel comfortable in the classroom with their teacher and their peers, experience appropriate levels of independence, develop behavioral regulation, and meet behavioral expectations, and fully participate and engage in classroom activities. The toddler class also has another domain, and it's called Engage Support for Learning. And this domain focuses on teachers' facilitation of activities that enhance children's thinking, reasoning, and verbal skills, build their knowledge about the world around them, and encourage persistence, attention, and motivation. So this is the stuff we want to see in classrooms every single day, because they're going to benefit children's development, both their learning and then their social emotional development as well. So for the analysis, we split the programs into 2 groups based on their improvement in class scores. And when we talk about improvement, we didn't want to compare a program who had improved by 0.0001, right? We wanted to talk about meaningful improvement. The class is rated on a 1 to 7 scale. So meaningful improvement typically is described as improvement by at least 1/4 of a point. So we split the sample into 2 groups: programs that improved by at least 1/4 of a point, and those programs that did not improve by 1/4 of a point. For programs that improved at least 1/4 of a point, we saw that usefulness ratings were higher. So there was a positive association with the quality of teacher-child interactions in these classrooms for both domains and total usefulness scores. So what's the takeaway with all the data analysis that we conducted? Essentially, early Head Start childcare programs that are using Alliance Core are reporting that it's useful and beneficial, and they're using the system. Site administrators who report Alliance Core as being more useful are also in programs with higher classroom quality. Now, is that causal? No, we didn't conduct an RCT. We can't say that it's causal. We can't say that using Alliance Core necessarily causes teacher-child interaction quality to be higher. But when we think about the benefits and we think about providers saying that it allows them to spend more time, it saves them time and energy, and they can spend some of that time ensuring that children are safe, ensuring that teacher-child interactions are of better quality in the classroom, we can start to see that there is an association here and there is a big benefit to using Alliance Core, and it may translate into higher quality interactions in the classrooms that could potentially benefit children in their development and their learning and in their potential future success. So now we just want to open it up for folks to ask questions. If you can't think of your questions now, of course, you can always forward them to the ELV team, but you can also communicate with us here through this email address. And as Michael said, he's going to be sharing these slides with you all, so our email address is going to be there as well. But if you have any questions now, we want to look into the chat box and see if folks have questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. Michael, you're muted.
Almost made it through without doing that. So one of the questions that I've had about this is just about the overall process, about like what were your initial steps when you went to do this. So would you mind just sharing a bit of the processes that
Sure.
you do?
So initially, we actually wanted to use data from the Alliance Core back end. So we wanted to look at user data, so back end user data, and try to quantify that and translate that into a utilization rate that would allow us to look at associations with important features that benefit children, such as teacher-child interaction quality in the class. We ended up not being able to do that as cleanly as we would like, because activity that was being logged in the system does not necessarily translate into meaningful utilization of the program. So we ended up developing this survey to ask very specific questions about knowledge, about utilization, about benefits. And we thought that this was going to more closely approximate the end users' interactions with the system and their perceptions of the system, and then be able to look at those associations with markers of quality. So we got together with the ELV team. We brainstormed the questions that we wanted to ask. We made lists of potential benefits that they had heard both from their interactions with providers on the marketing end of Alliance Core, but also from the coaches who were on the ground doing this work, working with providers. And we ended up creating the survey based on input from all of the stakeholders, and then sent that out. And we had a pretty good response rate. I think we had only about, Johira, do you remember how many respondents didn't end up completing the survey?
I want to say it was about 5. It was
Yeah, I think it was only about 5 providers who we sent the survey to that did not respond. One thing that was interesting was that sometimes in programs, there's a division of responsibility, of course, right? So to increase efficiency, sometimes different folks are performing different roles. So for some programs, we got responses from more than one administrator. And what we did is we wanted a site level representation of the data. So if there were 2 administrators who filled out the surveys because they had different roles, we took a look at that and we reconciled that so that whoever was responsible for a particular feature, that's whose response we used, and made sure that that was represented within here. But we still did get a few folks who said, that's not my responsibility, it's somebody else's job, but that person didn't fill it out. So like any other data collection, it's not going to be perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have a couple other ones that one of the ones that came in is actually one that I feel I should answer. The question is, for an individual that's currently using ProCare and Kid Reports, does your program do the same things? So childcare management systems, there's a whole bunch on the market. And when I look at the market, I tend to try to classify them into 2 main groups. The ones that primarily focus on the administrative side of things. So that is going to be the compliance pieces, the administrative pieces, billing, attendance pieces like that. And then you have ones that primarily focus on the marketing side. So that's very front end, trying to do, parental engagement and pieces like that. What you're seeing is you're seeing a whole bunch of these programs just try to do everything. And that includes us, honestly. So when you're saying, currently using ProCare and Kid Reports, do we do the same thing? We do basically everything that ProCare does, and our user interface is a lot better than theirs. The piece that we do not have, but is our main development item being worked on currently, is the very intensive deep dive parental engagement. We have parent engagement around texting, emailing, and leaving messages when people sign in, sign out. But we don't have that, like, this child got a diaper change at this time, this kid got this at that time, here's a picture of what they're doing at that time side of things. That is coming in Q1 or Q2 of next year. But that is, the piece. So if kids reports, no. ProCare, yes, everything. Let's see. So, oh, thank you. So we're joined, by the way, one of the audience members. In case you've never looked up Opportunities Exchange or the Iron Triangle, I highly recommend in your free time going and looking at them. They're absolute bastions of this field. And so this is just a comment to you all and to us about your data underscores for me the value of having technical assistance that is linked to use of core to help providers deepen engagement and understand the value proposition. In other words, software alone isn't the answer, but software linked to strategic technical assistance can be very powerful. And then, just an open-ended question of wondering how ELV is using this data to inform their technical assistance work. And so actually that started last week. We had our internal meeting about all this, and we had Johira and Veronica share with our entire team. And we're in our own little groups breaking down to make sure that we can get better at this across the team.
Hey, Michael, I just wanted to add to that. Louise, I totally agree. And that's exactly what I was going to say, that strategic planning is in the works. We have been sharing this as we've been examining the results with the internal team. But last week, we just shared with everybody who's on the ground doing this work, from marketing to coaching to the administrators within ELV. We shared these data with them, and we had the opportunity to talk a little bit more about whether these results meet their expectations, whether this is what they thought they were going to find, whether they had priorities and initiatives to support increased use of certain features. And that's where the comment came from about ratios, the importance of ensuring that the staff attendance is being captured, the child attendance is being captured, and it's accurate in real time, because there are safety issues and also compliance issues. I know the C word is a taboo term sometimes in early childhood in terms of compliance, because of course we want to think about continuous quality improvement, but the reality is that there are safety issues and funding issues where we do need metrics for compliance, and a lot of these features will help to streamline those processes. So absolutely thinking about how that can be done at scale with the programs that are currently using this, and using some of the feedback from providers, I think could be very powerful as well, because it's not the marketing team coming up with ideas for how to use these features or their perceptions of how useful it could be, but these are providers that are actually using these features every single day, and these are their perspectives. So some of the quotes that we have that we didn't quite share here today are also going to go into the report that could help to facilitate the importance of that. And it would be interesting to have a follow-up, as you suggested, which what is the strategic planning, right? What is the technical assistance that's going to be provided? And then perhaps we can do this survey again in a couple of years and see whether there is that improvement, and to see whether these services have been streamlined more effectively from the program administrator side.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Vero. And there is another good question that came in around the food program. So somebody's curious about the choice to use a different program for the CACFP. Do we know why providers make that choice? It seems counterintuitive. Yeah, so I could almost definitely let you know that is because the ones that are not using the entirety of our system for CACFP are the home providers in our sampling. And the reason for that is because currently we are not a food program sponsor in the state of Colorado. And if you are a home provider, you have to be utilizing a food program sponsor. But what's cool is on that end, we've been working with one of the sponsors here in Colorado, and then also a sponsor in one of our other states to basically work on that and to have more of the food program compliance pieces specific for homes. But all of our centers are basically using it for the food program, because, you know, the food program daily report, that's something that I hear, or not daily report, monthly report. It's something where, you know, I've heard from providers that they used to have to sit down the last day of every single month and just spend the entire day tabulating all their reports. But now they're able to just click one button. So that the reason for that is just some nuance with Colorado around food program sponsors.
And to your point, Michael, of how much time, that was one of the questions that one of the coaches asked that we actually didn't ask in the survey, which was, you know, folks said that it saved them time. How much time? So there are ideas, right? So if you're a good researcher, every time you ask a question and you answer it, you end up with more questions than what you originally started with. So it's another deeper dive that we eventually want to take into this data and go back to the providers and say, how much time does it save you, and what do you do with the time that you have that's saved? So making that link, I think, would be informative as well.
All right. So I believe, Elsa, if you wouldn't mind taking one of the questions that came in, I believe this is going to be more of an early Head Start focused question, which is around, can it provide organic foods, which I'm not entirely sure about.
So the answer there is a little bit complex because our early Head Start model is a partnerships model. So we don't actually operate our own center. We definitely kind of leave it up to the centers to figure out their food programs, because most of them have been involved with the CACFP food program since before they became EHS partners. So it's not something that we actually dictate to them.
Sorry, I'm typing answers and speaking answers. So a question did come in just about being able to share out both this recording and the report. So about 30 minutes after this webinar ends, everybody who registered for this is going to be receiving a copy of the slides and also a copy of this recording. And then also, would you mind just sharing, Vero and Johira, when we might have the full report? That way we can know when to disseminate that out to some of the ECE stakeholder folks that we have on.
So our goal is the second week of January.
Perfect. Second week of January. So yes, so we'll have the recording to you today, and we'll have the report to you hopefully second week of January. All right. But I think with that, I think that has been the majority of the questions that have come in. I am very apologetic if I've missed any of them. I'll keep it open just for another 2 minutes in case there was any other questions. But other than that, thank you so much for all of this work, Johira and Vero. It's been a pleasure working with you across this. I'm just a little disappointed that I was brought in so late to it. I love this kind of stuff, and I think this is super valuable for the field. So it's been wonderful to have you, and I'll be sad when second week of January rolls around.
All right. Thank you all. Happy holidays.
Awesome. All right. Thank you all, and stay tuned. We'll get that post-webinar messaging to you very shortly.